Appreciation program. I also take this opportunity to welcome His Grace Chaitanya Charan Pr to ISKCON Boston. So please join with me in welcoming His Grace Chaitanya Charan Pr by giving him a round of applause. So without much ado, I would like to pass it on to His Grace Chaitanya Charan Pr. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Repeat after me. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. This is the prayer to the all-pervading divinity within all of us to guide us toward light and wisdom. So one last time. Namo Vasudevaya. So thank you very much for your patience. I think we need some more patience with respect to the technology here. Can you hear me behind? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. So, all of you had volunteered for the Festival of the Chariots, and we want to express our appreciation to all of you. And I'll speak briefly based on the Bhagavad Gita on the topic of. Should I continue? Okay. Can you hear me without this or no?
Yes.
You can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll speak broadly on the topic of how service attitude, volunteering and service attitude, it changes us for the better. It improves us, it improves our character. So I'll start by asking one question. I'll use this as a whiteboard to write a few things and draw some things. So, do you think people are basically good or basically bad? How many of you think people are basically good? Okay. Thank you. How many of you think people are basically bad? Oh, practically no one. Good. Okay. Let me soften the question. How many of you think that some people are basically bad? Okay, a few hands are shot off, isn't it? So, in one sense, our heart wants to believe that people are good. That we want to believe that people are good, and yet we all have had some experience of how people can be cruel, people can be ruthless, people can be malicious, and especially if you encountered betrayal, cheating, somebody being a traitor. Now, at that time, just why would somebody do like this unless they're basically bad? So broadly, there are two theories about human nature. Now, what I'll be talking about in broad generalizations, because this is a big subject. But one side is, as you rightly said, people are basically good. And then what would be the opposite of that? People are, yes, thank you. People are basically bad. Now, most of us would not like to believe that people are basically bad. And now how people are does matter to us because we are inherently relational creatures. We do not exist in isolation. We want relationships. And in every relationship, there is a hope and there is a horror. In every relationship, there is a hope. The hope is the other person will change for the better. We all know we have faults, but we hope that the other person will improve. And every relationship, there is the horror. Horror is the other person may change for the worse. Now, to understand people's nature is therefore very important. And the Bhagavad Gita itself is a guidebook for human nature. The Bhagavad Gita is spoken to, by whom to whom? Does anyone know? Yes, Krishna to Arjuna. And the Bhagavad Gita has, any idea how many chapters? 18 chapters, thank you. So, 18 chapters. And at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, there's the warrior Arjuna who is hesitant to fight. He says, why should I fight at all? His concerns are three levels. First of all, at one level you can say, violence is itself bad. If issues could be resolved without violence, that's good. Always good. But here it's not just violence, it is massive violence. It's not just one person fighting against another, it is thousands, a huge army fighting against him. And on top of that, it's not just massive violence, it is fratricidal massive violence. What is fratricide? Yes, killing family. Like we have fraternity, that is a generalized term for family. So where the family feeling is there. So it is a fratricidal war. And he feels we should avoid this fight. And in answering Arjuna's question, Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita. Now Krishna has a very hard-eyed look at the nature of nature of human nature. And he says, the verse which I just was going to speak on. This is Dau Bhuta Sargau Lokesmin Daiva Asura Evacha Daivo Vistarashina Prokta Asuram Parthameshano. He said there are two kinds of people in the world. So these two kinds of people, we could put them in contemporary language. There are some people who are wise and there are some who are otherwise. So we have people of a godly or virtuous nature. And there are people who are of an ungodly or vicious nature. And of course, most of humanity, if you can consider, this is godly, this is ungodly, virtuous or vicious. Most of humanity exists, as they say, muddle in the middle. We are all a complex combination of good and bad. So the essential challenge, as well as individually as well as collectively, is how can we bring out our higher nature? We have a lower side, we have a higher side. We have a virtuous side, we have a vicious side. So how do we bring out the higher nature? If we could do that, our life would be so much better. The world would be so much better. As Martin Luther King said, that we have guided missiles and misguided men. That our technological power has far outrun our spiritual power. So that is one of the essential questions. Now the Gita puts this in two different terms, that there are godly and ungodly. So we could say, as I said, that most of humanity exists in between. So we could say there are people with goodness and there are people with wickedness. And in between are people with weakness. So goodness is people, these are people, no matter how much they are provoked, they always remain calm, they are always reasonable. It's not that they let people walk over them, but they're calm, they are measured, they're composed, they're reasonable. These are people of goodness. People are wicked, people who are wicked, if they are provoked, and even if they are not provoked, they can just not just get angry, but they can become outright evil. Everybody gets angry. Anger is just a human emotion. But different people, they keep their anger within different boundaries. So for example, anger is there. One boundary would be that you just don't show anything on your face at all. Be like a stoic. Another is, somebody is angry, they just grunt and they speak some words of displeasure. Somebody raises their voice. Somebody doesn't just raise their voice, they raise their fists. Somebody, when they get angry, they look for a knife to stab somebody. Somebody, when they get angry, they might actually look for an automatic rifle. And say, if the President of America or the President of Russia gets angry, they can nuke an entire country. So, the anger is a universal emotion. But different people, they keep their anger within certain boundaries. Now, wicked people, when they get angry, they have no sense of boundaries. They are provoked, they will do anything and everything. And such people, so the difference between goodness, weakness and wickedness. So, if you can consider this in terms of this, firm boundaries. Goodness is characterized by a sense of firm boundaries, okay? Wickedness is characterized by practically no boundaries. Now, when we are functioning in this way, no boundaries means that nobody can live with no boundaries. But the boundaries are only limited by external limits. If somebody is so angry, if they had a nuclear weapon, they would destroy a country. Well, they have nothing, so they will just speak some curses. Once I was trying to facilitate a mediation between two people, first person said, I understand you are very angry with me. Can you tell me, what have I done to make you so angry? The second person said, you exist. If somebody has an attitude like that, then it's almost impossible to mediate at that time. Other times something similar happened. First person said to another person, in a reconciliatory mode, he said that, I know you are very angry with me. Said, no, I'm not angry with you. Because anger is an expensive emotion and you are not worth it. You're almost dehumanizing the other person. So, when something like this happens, then reconciliation becomes very difficult. So, basically, when there is weakness, we all have moments of weakness. Sometimes we get angry, sometimes we may lie because there's a circumstantial pressure or whatever. So when there is weakness, and in response to weakness, there is forgiveness. Forgiveness in response to weakness is kindness. So, say we invite somebody to our home, and we find that we had invited them for some celebrations, a party, and while they are in our home, they steal something from us. How will we be outraged? How can you do something like this? But later on, we come to know that they were having some big health crisis in their family, and there was a moment of weakness, and they planned to return it, and this one return it, they fervently apologize. Say, okay, you're my friend, I want to report to the police. There's no need for a red mark on your career. It is just a moment of weakness. In the Ramayana, there's the story of Sugriv. Sugriv was in the forest, living threatened for his life constantly. And then finally, by Lord Ram's arrangement, he was enthroned as the king. But after the severe rainy season started, the torrential rains, and the agreement was Ram will help Sugriv to get his kingdom back, and Sugriv will help Ram to find Sita, who has been abducted by Ravana. But because of the rain, Sugriv just couldn't do anything. So imagine the situation where there is complete lockdown, there's no work from home, and there is full internet bandwidth. Because like 24-hour internet Netflix binging. So that's what Sugriv started doing. Completely forgot about his promise. The rainy season ended. But even after that, he continued on the same thing. Lord Ram was angry with him. Lakshmana was angry with him. But when Sugriv was reminded of his duty, he immediately, I'm sorry, I will immediately call all my assistants and we will find Sita. And after that, he was extremely competent. He was so totally competent that there was absolutely no questioning his dedication. So that was a moment of weakness. So when there is a moment of weakness, then what happens is forgiveness is good at that, and just being kind. We all will have moments of weakness. So generally we can say that when there are misdeeds, when somebody does something wrong, that could be over a spectrum. It could be because of completely circumstantial reasons. For Sugriv, it was completely circumstantial. That's why it was a moment of weakness. And sometimes it could be completely intentional. So, here I said weakness, if you respond to it with forgiveness, that is kindness. But if there is wickedness, and then we respond to it with forgiveness, that is not kindness, that is blindness, that is foolishness. Suppose some terrorist is on a rampage shooting innocent people, and the police is cornered that person. The police is about to shoot, and the terrorist's guns, he's run out of bullets. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I surrender. And the police lowers the gun, and in that moment the terrorist takes out a knife from his shoe and flings it at the police. The police dies. So, if somebody is wicked and you forgive them, that is not kindness, that is blindness. This is what happened in the Mahabharata. There is the story of Duryodhana. Duryodhana was such a dishonorable person that he tried to dishonor and disrobe Draupadi in public. There are people who commit crimes in private places. But imagine somebody is so brazen, that person goes to the police station or the court and commits a crime there. That means that person has no fear of law at all. So Duryodhana was such a person. And even after doing all this, there was not even the slightest repentance within. So in general, if after a misdeed, as I said, everybody can commit misdeeds. So after misdeed, there are two things should be there. There should be regret, and then there should be reform. Regret is more an internal feeling, and reform is an external action. If you see in Sugriv, both of these happened. That was for Sugriv. So generally when we are dealing with people, the Bhagavad Gita says that everybody has some weakness within them. Everybody has a mind that is conditioned. Everybody has darkness within them. But after a misdeed, there is neither regret, there is neither reform. The person doesn't feel that I did something bad, and that person doesn't try to reform themselves. This is the story of Duryodhana. Now Duryodhana, even after he had exiled the Pandavas, even after he had dishonored Draupadi, still after that they said, let's try to settle peacefully. And Krishna himself came as the peace messenger. When Krishna came as the peace messenger, the symbolism of that mission is itself important to understand. So right now there is a war going on with Russia and Ukraine. So imagine the president of Russia goes to Ukraine to seek peace. That means they're in dead earnest. So Krishna going there was like that. And what was Duryodhana's response? Krishna made an impassioned plea for peace. He said, actually they are right in half the kingdom, but you give them at least 5 villages. And what was Duryodhana's reply? He said, I won't give enough land to even put the tip of a needle through. If that had been the age of social media, this would have become a viral Insta reel. What a dialogue. I won't give enough land to even put the tip of a needle through. Kya dialogue hai? It will become like that. But if you look in context, what does it mean? Now suppose say we invite somebody for a program at our house. Maybe it's a birthday celebration, it's a wedding reception, or it's some festival, cultural festival. And they don't want to come. So they don't want to come, so they make an excuse. Now they are making an excuse, we know that they are making an excuse, and they know that we know that they are making an excuse. But still, out of politeness, they are trying to make an excuse. Suppose instead they say, even if I die, my dead body will never come for your program. Now, that is not just a refusal to the invitation. That is a kick in the face of the inviter. So Duryodhana's rejection was like that. So when there is wickedness, in the face of wickedness, if there is forgiveness, that will simply be foolishness. And that is why Krishna is not actually calling for violence in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is calling for an understanding of human nature. Once we understand human nature, then we can respond appropriately with different people. So I started by talking about this diagram here, that are people good or bad? Yeah. Are people basically good or people are basically bad? So the Bhagavad Gita explains, I'll make 2 points and then we can have some questions. The Bhagavad Gita says that actually speaking, people are multi-level. Our existence is threefold. So there is the body, there is the mind, and there is the soul. The body, the mind, and the soul. So the soul is always good. Everybody at the level of the soul is good, because every single being is a part of the divine. Now the mind, it depends. The mind is actually a machine. It's a mechanical functioning device. The mind is basically a programmable device. Programmable device means that the way we act, the mind tends to repeat those actions. Whatever action we do, the mind will repeat that again and again, or it will make it easier for us to repeat that action. So this body, mind and soul, as I said, you could understand this with a simple metaphor, contemporary metaphor. The body is like the hardware, the mind is like the software, the soul is the user in a computer system. Now, say suppose somebody on their phone has visited a particular website. There is a small thing in India. Has anyone heard of this?
Yes.
Okay. So, suppose somebody has visited a website called Bollywood.com. And they have visited not once, not twice, maybe 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. And then they come to a spiritual talk like this, and they hear the talk. Hey, this sounds interesting. So they hear this talk is based on Bhagavad Gita. So they decided to Google Bhagavad Gita. And they type B. And what happens? Bollywood.com comes. Now they didn't want to go to Bollywood.com, but it came as a autocomplete. Why is that? Because the browser has stored that in the history, and the browser is simply trying to make our browsing easier. But it is actually making it tougher right now because we want to go somewhere else. But similarly for us, whatever actions we have done in the past, the mind makes it easier for us to do the actions by repeating those propositions to us. So for example, if somebody grew up in a household where the only way you were heard, that person was heard, was by raising their voice and yelling. The solution to every problem is yelling. Or somebody else may have grown in an environment where whenever you have a problem, just drink and go hard. So then anytime they have any problem, they will gravitate toward that solution. And the tendency of the mind to repeat what we have done in the past is itself not a bad tendency. It is just a functional utility. Suppose you learn to drive for the first time. Now, if you first time learn to drive, it can actually be quite overwhelming. You say, yeah, I thought, okay, I have to look ahead and I have to hold the wheel. But no, you look ahead and then you look at this window and you have to look at this window and you have to look at this meter and you have to look at this meter and you have to make sure that your leg is pressing here and you have to make sure that leg is not pressing here. And then you have to look not only ahead, immediately you have to look far ahead and you have to make sure who is coming on the left side, who is coming on the right side. There's so many things, how can I keep track? I get overwhelmed. But the same person who, while trying to drive for the first or second time, feels overwhelmed, and they drive for a few times, and maybe a few weeks later, or certainly a few months later, they can nonchalantly drive while having a nice discussion with somebody else, or they can hear an audiobook, or they can hear a talk while they are driving. How does that happen? Because the mind starts repeating what has been done repeatedly. So the mind just fits into place. Okay, this is what I should be doing. Okay, look here, look here, look here, and now continue. So the mind's tendency to repeat itself is not a bad thing. Or to make repetition easy is not a bad thing. But it can become a bad thing when we want to change our behavior. So if you consider this way, I said that our existence is 3 levels. The soul for everyone is pure. But around the soul, there is the mind. So some minds are filled with extremely dark conditionings. So for example, now this conditioning can be from their upbringing in this life, this conditioning even from their previous lives. So all children cry, all newborn babies cry, but some babies cry as if they're going to bring the whole house down. So there are others, some people have some negative conditioning from the past. Some people may have a much more positive conditioning from the past. So are people basically good or basically bad? It depends. At the level of the soul, everybody is good. At the level of the mind, it depends on the conditionings. It depends on the kind of conditionings that we have, the kind of sites that we have visited, those will be auto-coming as auto-complete. Now the key thing over here is that if the mind is a programmed device, then that also means it's a reprogrammable device. And that's the last part of the talk. I started by saying how the Bhagavad Gita says that how service and service attitude can change us for the better. So, one of the easiest ways to recondition our mind, to change the conditioning in our mind, is by doing activities that involve a certain level of selflessness. The negative conditionings in our mind, they make us selfish. So, when we are selfish, that means we're only concerned about myself, my feelings, my desires, my comfort. But when we try to do some service, we're thinking of some cause beyond ourselves, something of value beyond ourselves. And that, when we do it even once, that actually starts awakening our spiritual nature. The world, and often the materialistic culture of the world, teaches us that it is in possessing, it is in acquiring, it is in getting that we will find pleasure. However, we are, as I said, relational creatures. Relational creatures means that we have a need to take or get, and we have a need to give or to share. We have both these needs in life. And most of the time, because we live in a competitive world, we have to fight to gain what we want. Whether it's admission in a particular university, whether it is a job in a particular company, whether it's a particular housing space, whether it is a particular partner, we have to fight. And that is why the focus of our energy usually goes on getting, on acquiring, on gaining. And yes, for functioning in life, it is required that we gain. But as spiritual beings, we also have a need to give. As long as our focus is on getting, we will be more or less going along the default conditionings of our mind. Our mind will prompt us, okay, I want to be famous, I want this, I want that, I want that. And we'll keep doing those things. But one of the easiest ways to recondition our mind, to reprogram our mind, is to act in a mood of service, to volunteer for some cause bigger than ourselves. And when we do that, it's almost mysterious that somehow some part of us experiences some joy. Have any of you experienced this, that when you do something where you're not going to gain anything directly yourself, but still you gain satisfaction? You ever experienced this? Yeah. Isn't it? So, yeah, those of you not experienced it, you're welcome to experience it in the future. I'm sure you have experienced sometime or the other you will be here also. But the point is that act of service itself is one of the most powerful ways of changing the conditioning of our mind. And ultimately, if we want satisfying relationships, we can't have satisfying relationships if we are only seeking. But to be seeking, we have to be sharing. So, the Gita talks about This is the 12th chapter. In 12.8 to 11, it talks about 3 levels. So within this giving, there is service. Any kind of service, the Gita says, is something that will help us grow. It will create an ethos of selflessness in our mind. It will recondition our mind. So it may be environmental cause, it may be some humanitarian cause, it may be some animal shelter, it may be some disaster relief. Whatever cause, something bigger than ourselves, if we do some service, we'll find not only will it give us some satisfaction, but also change the conditioning in our mind. So basically we could say the human journey, if I said earlier about how we all have certain conditionings in our mind. So what we would like to do, most of us are not entirely black. Our conditionings are entirely dark. We have some dark conditionings, some bright conditionings. So the journey of transformation for us to become better human beings is that conditioning within us changes. So what we would like is, okay, there is some negativity within me, but I would like to increase the positivity within me. Yes, there will be times when I'll get angry, but I don't just want to blow at anyone who angers me. Let me try to be calmer. Let me try to be more considerate. So this is the journey of self-improvement, self-transformation. And this journey, one of the easiest ways to do that is through service. So now, service of any cause is helpful. But the Gita says devotional service is even better. This is in 12.10 in the Bhagavad Gita. Why is devotional service means? Service directed in the mood of devotion toward the divine. That kind of service is a powerful way to change the conditioning of our mind. Why? Because the divine is all pure. And let's say if we have a puddle of water, and the puddle of water is dirty, now we can take one bucket, and we may have a small pond or something small. We take one bucket out of that and we throw it away, and we pour another bucket, trying to clean it that way. So if we have a pond and we replace one bucket at a time, we will change the water, but it will take a long time. So we try to change our conditionings like that. But suppose we have a pond, now the pond is unclean and we want to clean it. Another way to clean the pond is, we have the pond here, we just link it to a river of clean water. We connected the clean river, and the water within it will become immediately replaced. Far more effectively, far more expeditiously. So linking that with that clean river, that is devotional service. Because the divine is all pure. And when we connect with the divine, then purification starts happening within us. Our inner conditionings start getting cleansed away. And then above that is pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means we turn to God not so that He will do something in return for us. Yes, that's also good. Once a person went to a temple and he prayed, "Oh God, I bought this lottery ticket. It's worth $1 million. If I win this lottery, I'll give you half in donation." Waited for 1 week with bated breath. And when he went finally, he saw that his number had won the ticket. He was delighted, jumping up and down in joy. Till he realized, actually, he had got a second prize. The second prize was $500,000. So he went to the temple and he said to God, "Oh God, you're so clever. You took your cut before only. So, sometimes if we approach God with a very utilitarian mood, then there is not much of a personal bond that is established. There is not a personal connection that is established. But in this pure devotion service, we connect with the Lord not because of what He gives us, but because of who He is. Because of the inner, not so much the outer blessing, but the inner blessing, the inner enrichment, the inner contentment that can happen. So this is what the Gita talks about in 12.8 and 9. So at whatever level we connect, that the Gita says is auspicious. So in 4.11 it essentially says, at your pace, from your place, wherever we are, from your place, at your pace, access the divine grace. Mama vartamanu vartante manushyaha partha sarvashaha. That this is a path that is open for everyone. Whatever place we may be at presently, whatever pace we want to move forward, each one of us can embark on this journey of self-transformation, on this journey of inner elevation. And all of you took significant steps on that journey by your act of voluntary, by your engagement in service. And I offer my prayers and best wishes. We continue on in this journey and discover the treasure of wisdom and virtue that is hidden within yourself at your spiritual core. So I'll summarize. I spoke 3 main points today. First, I talked about human nature. We discussed, are people basically good or basically bad? We said it's a combination. We said that people are multi-level. It is, I think some of you said that some people are bad. Why is that? It depends on the conditionings in their mind. The soul, the mind, and the body. So depending on the kind of conditionings that are there in the mind, some people, at the level of soul, everybody is good. But at the level of the mind, people's mind is based on how they are. Some people may be more inclined toward virtue. Some people may be more inclined toward vice. Then based on that, I talk about response. That we could say, there are people with weakness. And for them, if we forgive, then that is what? Then you remember? Kindness. I give the example of Sugriva over here. On the other hand, somebody else has wickedness. And if you forgive them, what is that? That is blindness, that is foolishness. They'll simply abuse that. So we need to understand. The Gita is not indiscriminately calling for violence at all. The Gita is calling for understanding of people, human nature, and then appropriate response. And then we discussed about how we can rise from whatever level at to a higher level. That is, I talked about the mind, we can reprogram it. It is programmable and we can reprogram. Whatever we are conditioned from the past, one of the ways we can reprogram it is through service. The conditioned mind is always selfish. But service can help us just by experiencing the satisfaction of giving, of sharing. We show our mind that there's a better way to live, there's a better way to seek happiness. We have a need to get, but we also have a need to give. So by service, what happens is we connect with our spiritual core. Service in one sense links us with our soul, with our spiritual core. And if we do devotional service, then that connects us with the divine. And that's like we are cleansing ourselves not just by replacing one bucket of water with another, but by cleansing ourselves, our pond, by just connecting with the river of clean water. And that way, each one of us can make this journey from wherever we may be on the otherwise spectrum to the from otherwise to wise. Thank you very much. Hey. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
normally in our daily lives we find like so many people have different interests, and based on our interests we find some people find this particular task easy, but that task is difficult for the other person.
Correct, yeah.
So same thing in this service, there are so many different types of service, like based on even in terms of yoga there are different forms of even I talk in terms of yoga, there are different paths of yoga.
Yes.
So how can one figure out which is best suited for him or her based on his nature? It could be possible that maybe the devotional part could be difficult for him, but could be the other path may be easier for him because based on the circumstances or the past history where he grew up. So how can one easily decide which one is really easy for him or her, or
Okay, good question. So, is it which path is easiest for us? Won't that be determined by each person's past? Yes and no. But yes, it is definitely true. Like I said that we have a soul, around that soul we have the mind, and around the mind is the body. Now the body and the mind, both of these are affected by the past. The kind of body we have, the kind of mind we have, both of them are affected by the past. However, the soul itself exists beyond time. The soul is not a product of the past. The soul is not a prisoner of the past. So at one level, based on the kind of body-mind machine we have, we may be inclined toward particular actions, and that's perfectly fine. So the word yoga has a generic meaning, that is connection. It is cognate with the word yoke in English. Yoke means we connect a bull to a plow with a yoke. So like that, yoga means connect. Connect what? Connect the soul with the whole. The soul is the source of all of reality. And there are various ways of connecting. There could be karma yoga, there could be dhyan yoga, there could be jnana yoga, there is bhakti yoga. So ultimately the idea is that we all want to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And while there are different yogas which help us to connect, now bhakti yoga is sometimes thought of as the path of the heart. While it is true, it is not just a part of the heart. Bhakti yoga also involves philosophy. So bhakti yoga also involves the element of jnana. Bhakti yoga also involves doing practical service. That is karma. Bhakti yoga also involves meditation. There is dhyana. So bhakti yoga is not so much an action as a disposition. So the element of bhakti, of what is seeking to connect with the divine, can be present in various paths. So in those terms, the Bhagavad Gita concludes in 1866 by saying, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. That I taught you many paths, O Arjuna, but right now you focus on the path of bhakti. So yes, the Bhagavad Gita is both, it is definitely inclusive. Any path that anybody seeks for rising higher, that is praise. Nahi kalyana kut kaschit durgatim data gacchati. Anybody choosing any path for spiritual growth is applauded in the Bhagavad Gita. It is inclusive, at the same time, it is not inconclusive. The Gita has its own conclusion. Now, whether that the conclusion, as I said, is given in 1866. Now, of course, depending on one's individual nature, one may find a particular path more accessible. But even that path can be practiced with a devotional disposition. So, in general, say if a person is caught in a house on fire, now which is the best way to get out of a house on fire? Whichever is the closest, isn't it? It is a door, a window, whichever is the closest. So, in general, it is for us, rather than worrying too much about, okay, this path or that path or that path, well, let's begin the journey. I'm not thinking of this path or that path. That can cause, as often known as, paralysis by analysis. So just start from wherever we are, start on the spiritual journey and have that trust that there is a higher intelligence, there is a higher power guiding us. And whichever path we are meant to follow, we will get connected with that path. So if we start taking steps, you have come here now, you've been able to connect with spirituality over here, you have that access to that path, start off. And whatever we are meant to do, whichever path is best for us, that will be revealed in due course. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
You spoke about forgiveness, and so when you talk about not forgiving wicked people because that would be foolishness, what if we're in the same situation as Arjun, for example, it's a family member, we cannot get rid of this person, but we also can't constantly, we have to at some point let go, right? We have to forgive for our own sake, so
Yes.
how do you deal with that?
So you're saying that sometimes if we are in a relationship where it's almost like a permanent relationship, so we can't, that person is hurting us, at the same time we cannot really take strong action against them. So what do we do at that time? Yes, see, the opposite of forgiveness is not revenge. Sometimes people think, if I don't forgive, what do? I will take revenge. No, it's not that simple. It's important to understand what forgiveness is not and what forgiveness is. Now, for example, forgiving is not the same as trusting. Forgiving is for the past. Trusting is for the future. So, forgiveness can be given to the other person, but trust has to be earned. So, generally speaking, in close relationships, if somebody's been hurting us repeatedly, the best thing to do is to erect some boundaries. Now, how exactly the boundaries can be erected, it depends. Sometimes we don't meet that person so much, we don't spend too much time alone with that person. Sometimes we just learn to develop a thick skin and not take their comments too seriously. And we humans are very resilient. It's like maybe the first time if you come here from a country like India, the cold might seem unbearable. And the cold is severe, but after a few months, after a few years, the body gets used to it. Like that, there are some people who are always going to criticize us. No matter what we do, they will. It's easier for there to be a rainstorm in the Sahara than a word of praise will come from their mouths. So if that happens, then if you consider relationship management, it has two principles. Don't overvalue those who devalue us. There will always be people who will be devaluing us. We do 100 right things and they will say the 101st you did not do. So the people like that, just don't take their comments too seriously. And the key to do this is the second part. Value those who value us. We all have people with whom we can bond nicely, they value us, they connect with us. But sometimes because they connect so nicely, because we feel they are always available and we take them for granted. But in general, if we can find people who value us and then we start valuing them. As we develop a meaningful relationship with those people, then these other interactions, they won't trouble us so much. So not forgiving, we have to forgive for ourselves means that, okay, I won't hold this against you, I won't seek to get back at you, but I will, in one sense, forgiveness means, the essence of forgiveness is to take away the other person's power to hurt us. Now, how do we take away that person's power? Sometimes it may be by seeking the rule of law and having that person punished if they have done some crime or something like that. Sometimes it may be just by moving that out of that person's proximity. that our paths don't cross. And sometimes it may be if our paths are going to cross, then we stop overvaluing their words. This is just the way the person is. Sometimes people think that detachment means being hard-hearted. But a practical understanding of detachment is that you have a right to your opinion about me, and I have no obligation to correct your opinion about me. If I am attached, then I think you cannot think bad about me. You don't have that right. Well, we don't control that. And if you are attached, we'll start thinking that, no, if you think bad about me, I have to correct it. No. Detachment means, this understanding of detachment is Smano Dujate Loko, Lokano Dujate in 1250. The first part is, you have a right to your opinion. One of my friends puts it, you have a right, I respect your right to be wrong. It's a sarcastic way of putting it, but you have a right to your opinion. And I don't have the responsibility to set your opinion right. You may have your opinion and whatever it is. Yeah, if you are attached to your opinion, if you are fixed on your opinion, it's not my responsibility to correct it. But that opinion can be about me also. But that's okay. You think, oh, but that person will speak to 100 other people about it. Well, if that person is speaking negative, actually people have their own intelligence, people will evaluate. And if somebody is going to believe somebody, anything that somebody speaks, then maybe we don't need those people as our friends. Okay? Thank you. Yes.
From the Ramayana, I have one question.
Take the mic. May I request all the people to move forward? There are so many devotees who are standing outside, and don't stand in the. If you want to stand, we go at the back. Please come forward. Move forward. Move. This is the interesting part. Many people would like to hear, and you may have some questions, or you may not have some questions, but it will help you to actually understand. Please come. Please move forward. Move forward. More. Because I cannot say this again and again because there are so many people outside. Please. Listen. Prabhu has created more space. Please move forward. Once and for all, let's move forward. Yeah. Move. When I say move means you have to actually move a little further. So not just like here. Please move. Please. Because we are depriving all the people who are standing outside, from this wonderful discussion. Yeah. Okay, sorry, bro. Go ahead. And please take the microphone if you have any questions and speak in the microphone so that everybody can hear. At the same time, it's online also, so people who are online, they can also hear the question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my question is from the Ramayana. If we see the case of Ravana, he was a pure devotee of Lord Shiva, yet he is considered as evil. He was evil. So, don't you think that the devotion, the servitude, attitude of servitude towards the humanity should be placed above the servitude towards the divine? Because
okay, good question. So, Ravan was a great devotee of Shiva, still he was evil. So yes, so you see in this particular same chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, I talk about 12:13 to 12:20. Basically, Krishna talks about the kind of devotees who are dear to him. And all these characteristics are essentially virtues. So you could say that there is, virtue means you could say normal good behavior, honesty, cleanliness, kindness, politeness, like that. So if you consider 4 quadrants, there is virtue and there is devotion. So the two are not coincident. Now we could say this, if there is neither virtue nor devotion, that is the worst. Because then that person is neither doing anything good in the world, nor are they going to do anything good beyond the world. Now if there is no virtue, but devotion. So the idea is, you see, we are existing in this world and we are trying, virtue means we'll try to do some good. We are kind to others, we are helpful to others, and that's excellent. There are not many people like that. But the thing is that we humans, we are meaning-seeking creatures. And without an understanding of or connection with a higher reality, ultimately life ends up becoming meaningless. Okay, I exist in this world, I exist for some time, I may do good at that time, and that's good, that's great. But eventually, we're going to die. What is the meaning and purpose of life? That our good activities just become like a flash of lightning in the darkness of existence. Without an understanding of divinity, without devotion to divinity, there is no ultimate meaning. There is temporary goodness, there is temporary meaning in life, but no ultimate meaning. Now, if there is only devotion and no virtue, then that can also be toxic. This is also toxic. This is where people can sometimes become fanatical. But if there is no understanding of the bigger picture of life, then I think I'm devoted, therefore I'm a good person. No. The devotion needs to be translated into good actions, into virtuous actions, kind actions. So what the Gita recommends is this. The quadrant where there's devotion and virtue both. Now you could say among these two, which is better? Well, at one level we can say that a person having no devotion but person with virtue is good. Yeah, definitely. Another level, devotion is not just an activity. Devotion is a transformative activity. So, devotion itself creates the engine, creates the propelling energy by which one can will develop virtue. Now, in some people it may not develop because for them their devotion is not actually centered on God. Their idea of being devoted to God is their way of making themselves feel good and look good in the world's eyes. Now we have one of our Hare Krishna temples is in Juhu. Juhu is a place very close to Bollywood. Especially in time the Janmashtami, a lot of Bollywood stars also come over there. Now, I don't want to judge why, what reason they come. But many times after they come, they will have photos clicked and then put on their Instagram and social media. And people say, oh, he's a nice person, you're so famous, you're so wealthy, still you go to temple. Now, when they're going to temple, are they going to take darshan or are they going to give darshan? This is not a comment on any particular star. The point is that for some people, especially if there's a pious society, devotion or just a showing of devotion is a way to increase one's prestige in society. So if devotion is simply nothing more than a social cosmetic, we all put cosmetics look better. Some people just do some prayer, come to a temple, and that's how they look better. If that is all the devotion is, it's only show, then that can be counterproductive. So Ravana's devotion was like that. Ravana was devoted to Lord Shiva, but it was, you give me power. It was not really concern for Shiva. If it had really been concern for Lord Shiva, then he could have prayed to Lord Shiva before deciding to abduct Sita. Is this virtuous? Is this the right thing to do? Should I do it? Should I not do it? There's no account. He worshipped Shiva for power, but he never worshipped Shiva for wisdom. So if we are really devoted, then we will not just seek power so that we can gain greater control over others. See, there is a difference. In one sense, power can give us outer control. And we all need this in life. But actually, we also need wisdom. And wisdom gives us inner control. So, who we are worshipping is important. But why we are worshipping is also important. So, Ravana was devoted, but unfortunately, his devotion was quite self-centered. Okay. Thank you for that good question. Yes, please.
Can you compare the difference between yoga and bhakti yoga? And when we say one is easier than another, then what's the meaning of being easy?
Okay, what is the difference between yoga and bhakti yoga? Thank you for that question. See, at one level, every yoga, whichever yoga anybody practices, if they find it easy, start it off. Krishna says that any way we start the spiritual journey, that is good. So broadly, there are two categories of spiritual paths. There is the path, you could say the path of disengagement. That means we turn away from the world and focus on the spiritual. And then there is the path of engagement. So you can categorize spiritual paths like this. Now, among the paths of disengagement, there is yoga. That is, this is some technically the Bhagavad Gita calls it Dhyan Yoga, the path of meditation, and there is Gyan Yoga. Now, nowadays, yoga is very popular, but that is just the first stage of yoga, that is the asanas. And that is very preliminary. Actual serious yoga for spiritual growth involves disengaging from the world, renouncing the world, going to the forest. That is one way of good. Now, in the path of engagement, there are two paths. There is karma yoga, and then there is bhakti yoga. So the idea is that we are basically creatures who are active. We can sit inactive for some time. And if somebody is constantly running around, just sitting down peacefully is good. Sometimes if a person is constantly like a chatterbox, okay, sit down, don't talk. It's very difficult to not talk. But if you stop talking, you can think. But we are not being given the power of speech so that we crush it. Ultimately, I mean, silence ourselves. No, the power of speech is meant to be utilized. So, in one sense, using what we have is much easier and much more natural than suppressing or silencing or giving up the use of what we have. So Gyan Yoga and Dhyan Yoga, in their serious spiritual advanced stages, center on disengagement from the world. Whereas Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga center on engagement in the world. So in Karma Yoga, we first cultivate an attitude of selflessness. Okay, I'm doing something, but I'm doing it for a higher cause. And in Bhakti Yoga, we identify that higher cause to be the divine. And then we act in the mood of service to the divine. So the path of engagement is relatively easier because activity is natural for us. Klesho diktarastesha avyakta asakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavadmiravapiti. Krishna says in the Gita that this path is difficult because inactivity is not natural for us. And just in the next verse, 12:6-7, he says, Tesham aham samuddharta mrityu samsara sagarat. He says, I personally help those who engage themselves in my service. So because it is natural, it is easier. Okay? Yes, please.
I actually had a follow-up question on the previous question. So when we said that somebody who is high on virtue, that's more, and not towards the devotional part, that's more a temporary impact and a temporary engagement. Though I agree that divinity does help you in calming yourself and going towards goodness, I personally have known people who may be an atheist, don't believe in divine power, but are great human beings with the best virtues, and it comes from within them. They are like, hey, this is how I want to be as a human, this is how I want to leave a mark. So maybe that is my understanding is, yes, for a lot of people, divinity is the easier path because just being from within a person like this is tougher. But I don't think it's only a temporary thing if you truly can dig deep and be that person.
Okay. Yeah, good question. See, when I say the question is that sometimes there can be people who may have virtue but without any devotion, and they may be actually very deeply virtuous and they're sustainably virtuous. So when I said it's temporary, I didn't mean that they're virtuous today and they'll not be virtuous tomorrow. That's not the meaning I had. What I meant is that their virtue may be their lifelong, but their life, even for themselves, doesn't exist within a greater fabric of meaning. Okay, I exist right now, I try to do as much good as I can in this world. But one bug or one bang, our life ends. And then what is the point of it all? So there is not a greater fabric of meaning within which we are weaving the thread of our life. Now let me complete this point. I said that. So one key difference between the Bhagavad Gita and say many other religious traditions. At one level, the various religious traditions are meant to take us toward the divine. But there is a difference between a non-believer and a wrongdoer. There are certain religions which consider somebody to be a non-believer, somebody to be an atheist. That itself is a sin against God. And he will be punished for that. The Bhagavad Gita is not like that. The Bhagavad Gita talks about two parameters for judging people. There is for evaluating where a person is. So there are operational virtues, and those operational virtues are associated with what is called the modes, the three modes of material nature, three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. And there are then ultimate virtues. They are associated with one's devotion. So the idea is that somebody is driving a car. Some people drive a car in such a way that everybody else stops driving the car. Somebody is driving drunk and their car is weaving left and right, and then even if you are giving an exam for getting a license, they'll say if you see somebody driving, just pull over, let them pass by, isn't it? So some people drive in a very disruptive, even destructive way. Some people drive in a very careful way, and they park neatly so that others can park in the adjoining places. So this is the way somebody is driving. That's one thing. And now, how somebody is driving is important, and where someone is driving is also important. Somebody may be driving very smoothly, very safely, but they don't know where they are going. Or say they are going in the wrong direction. That their driving is safe and smooth, but it's not taking them closer to a destination. So the best is where somebody is a safe and smooth driver and the person knows the destination that they're going to go to. So within the Gita's categorization, if somebody is virtuous, even if that person is not devoted, that person is virtuous, that person will be elevated, that person will be recognized for their goodness and they will be rewarded for their goodness. Urdhvam gacchant sattvastha. That sattva, the mode of goodness, the Gita does not describe devotion as an inherent characteristic of goodness. As you rightly said, somebody could be an atheist and that person can be kind, that person can be forgiving, that person can be charitable, that person can be courteous. And these virtues, when they are present, they have to be appreciated. So it is just that when those virtues are present in a person who is not devoted or not spiritual, there are two things. Can atheistic people be good people? Of course, they can be. However, their goodness does not come because of their atheism. In many ways, it comes independent of their atheism. By their upbringing, by their previous life karma, they are the people who have chosen to be good. They're inclined toward good, and that needs to be recognized. And maybe they have had some negative experiences with religion or with religiosity or whatever, and that's why they want to keep a distance from that. So such goodness is to be appreciated and valued, and it is valued in the Bhagavad Gita. The one point of religion or spirituality, religion is basically a set of practices, spirituality is the inner understanding with which you are doing it. That is that can actually provide a worldview which can inspire a person to change for the better. So that the present, at the present level of virtue, a person who is atheistic may be more virtuous than a person who is devoted. However, if we want to transform and elevate human society, there are few methods which are as time-tested and as powerful as a connection with the divine. The world tried out atheism. It was tried out in atheism as a form of government, was tried out in Soviet Russia and communist China. And what was the result? 100 million corpses without a war. The government itself killed 100 million people in those two countries. Some people say religion causes war. Well, it's not religion that causes war, it's people who are religiously fanatical who cause war. But taking that same criteria, not all the religious wars in human history have not had a toll coming to 100,000, 100 million people. That is the toll of just the 70 rules of atheism in the two countries where atheism was the official dogma of the state. So atheists can be good people, but it is not the atheism that makes them good, in spite of their atheism. Okay? Thank you. Yes, please.
Sorry. So to what degree is being evil a choice versus to what degree is it an unchangeable product of one's past karma or upbringing?
It's a very good question. I don't know if I have the choice to answer that question. Okay. So this brings us to the fundamental question of free will. Do we really have free will? Well, at one level, we can say that if there was not the basic assumption of free will, there could be no justice in society. There could be no responsibility in relationships. If a person commits a crime, if somebody speeds, the cops pull them over. Why did you speed? He says, I don't have free will. Well, you may not have free will, I have free will, I'm going to fine you now. Isn't it? We function, society cannot function without the understanding that there is free will. Now, of course, what can vary is the degree of free will that a person has. So before I go specifically to evil people, let me start with something a little easier to understand. If we consider addiction. Now, when nobody is born, for example, with a cigarette in their mouth or with a bottle in their mouth, they all start at some time. So initially when a person starts smoking or drinking or doing drugs, if we consider a mountain, at the top of it, it's a snowball. Actually, it's not even a snowball. At the top, when it is being formed, it's a snow pebble. Then as it starts coming down, it becomes a snowball. As it comes down further, it becomes a bigger snowball. Then by the time it comes down, it has become a giant snow boulder. So at the time when it is a snow pebble, a person could have just clicked it, flipped it with their toe, and it would have broken apart. Now by the time it becomes a snowball or a snow boulder, right, what to speak of that toe, that snow boulder can crush the entire person. So how it is, addiction grows like this. Initially, that person had a choice. Somebody said, let's go and drink. Let's take some drugs. He says, no, I'm not going to take it. They could have said no. But they did. They say yes, and they say yes, and they say yes, and it becomes more and more forceful. And eventually, it's almost impossible for them to say no. So now the key is that if we consider our cravings, and the same principles are applied to evil, but let's focus more on self-destructive actions rather than destructive actions. Destructive for others. The principle is the same. So if we consider the graph of time versus craving, there are times when the cravings just surge. So you could say these are urges, and the urges have surges. So now when the surges occur, it may be impossible to resist. But the key is that the surges are not there all the time. So the scope of free will is here between the urges. When the person gets the urge to drink or to take drugs, they just can't resist it. Okay, they may not be able to resist it. But what do they do in between? In between, are they scheming and plotting, how can I get the next drink? Or are they trying to associate with some good people, develop some good habits, and learn some practices for de-addiction? So if they are doing that, then they will be strengthening themselves. And so even if we can't resist our urges, we can persist between our urges. And it will take time, depending on how strong the conditioning is. We persist between our urges, gradually we keep growing, we keep strengthening. And then eventually, what will happen is the gap between the urges will become lesser and lesser, more and more. So two things will happen with time. Over time, the urges themselves will not be so big, and then they will become less frequent. So that way, a person's capacity to tolerate them, to endure them, not succumb to them will increase. The same principle applies to evil. Some people may just have the natural tendency to hurt others. When they speak, they love to be sarcastic. They just like to insult others. When they see somebody wince in pain, breathe in pain, they get a perverse joy in it. That's just, okay, I could say that's the conditioning. But it's not that that conditioning is haunting them 24 hours. If in between, they somehow can associate with people who are kind. It's difficult, but if they do that, then they'll say, hey, there's another way to live, another way to function. And that's how they will change. So when we say persist between the urges, one of the key things here is association. So if we can associate with people who have the kind of behavior that we wish to develop, the kind of healthy habits that we want to have, then that change will become much easier. It will take time, but the Bhagavad Gita assures that no conditioning is beyond reformation. It's just, there are no unrealistic goals, but there can be unrealistic deadlines. For somebody, they may just decide, for the next 21 days, I'm going to go to cold turkey. I'll never drink. And after 21 days, they just lose the urge to drink. Somebody does that, but after 21 days, they again relapse. And it may take them 21 months to actually become free. So our key for transformation is in between the urges. Does that answer your question? So thank you very much for your thoughtful participation.